Are we going to fix that? I don't know.
Hi, crew. Welcome to the only channel that brings you behind the courtroom, beyond the sanitized TLC edit, and right into the reality the cameras didn't show you. Today's tale, it is about how tears aplenty weren't sufficient to stop Kody Brown and wife. Number 4, Robin from the one thing they've been trying to avoid for years, accountability. But let's begin. The Flagstaff courtroom was not flashy. No cameras, no lights from the production team, just wood walls, a smattering of supporters up in the gallery, and a jury that appeared part curious and part wary. Case title on the docket. Brown v. Brown on one side, Christine and Janelle Brown, no longer mere wives in a plural marriage, but plaintiffs with lawyers and stacks of paperwork. On the other side, Kody and Robin Brown, holding each other tight, cowering behind a legal team that appeared to be cocky, at least for the first 5 minutes. The accusations: breach of fiduciary duty, unjust enrichment, intentional infliction of emotional distress. At the center, money, manipulation, and deceit. The minute Judge Harrison entered the courtroom, you knew it. This wasn't going to be a long-winded soap opera. This was going to be quick, biting, and horrific. Opening statements get the tone established. Christine and Janelle's lawyer, Anna Sharma, didn't mince words. She informed the jury, this is not a case about a messy breakup. This is a case about deceit, about millions run through shell accounts, about women being told they are part of a family and then excluded from decisions and money, about emotional sadism disguised as leadership. Kody's lawyer, Silas Croft, painted a different picture: bitter exes, scorned women, a divorce turned ugly. He said the plaintiffs were exaggerating, twisting facts to punish a man who had moved on. But Croft made one mistake early. He leaned heavily on Robin's tears. You'll see, he said, that Robin Brown, a woman of faith and integrity, never asked for this. She never wanted drama. She just wanted peace. The jury glanced at Robin. She blew her nose on a tissue, already sobbing before any evidence had been introduced. But if sympathy was what Croft believed would win the day, he was mistaken, because what followed would dispel the illusion. The first exhibit, wire transfers, on the screen in the courtroom were family traditions, TLC bank statements, the organization that was supposed to hold family money, royalties, and income from TLC, line after line of money going out. Not to pay mortgages on the wives' properties, not to develop on Coyote Pass, not to pay for Christine's relocation costs or Janelle's construction plans. Instead, the payments went to KN Fair Holdings, LLC, a bank account wholly controlled by Kody and Robin. The figures weren't insignificant. 10,000 here, 20,000 there, occasionally 30,000. Christine and Janelle remained serene, but unyielding while the jury wrote notes. Croft tried to interpret it as standard financial structuring, objecting. But when the judge accepted the records into evidence, the atmosphere changed. The jury wasn't witnessing a dysfunctional family. They were witnessing a calculated deception. And that was only the start, because when the prosecution summoned their first witness, the gallery sat forward. Everyone knew her name would make all the difference. Mindy Jessup, Robin's niece, the nanny, the woman who had lived in the Flagstaff house 5, sometimes 6 days a week, and her testimony would be the spark that ignited the flame. The courtroom fell silent as Mindy Jessup was sworn in. She didn't appear to be a woman hungry for the spotlight. In a modest gray blazer, her hair smoothed back from her face, she resembled someone walking into a job interview, rather than someone ready to provide the most explosive testimony of the whole trial. But don't be mistaken. What she had to say would rock the Brown family to its very foundation. Anna Sharma, the attorney for Christine and Janelle, began matter of factly. She wanted the jury to regard Mindy as trustworthy before they listened to the bombshells. Miss Jessup, tell us your full name for the record. Mindy Alice Jessup, she replied, her voice firm but soft. And how are you connected to the defendant, Robin Brown? She is my aunt, my mother's sister. And were you ever worked for by the Browns? Yes, Mindy said. I worked for them as their nanny. From late Faye through the summer of Faye, I assisted with homeschooling, childcare, and domestic chores. 8 to 10 hours a day, 5 or 6 days a week. That response hit like a punch. She was not a weekend babysitter. She was not a drop-in friend. She spent almost daily time within that residence for 3 years. She witnessed things others did not. Who paid your salary? Canfair Holdings, LLC, Mindy replied without pause. A ripple coursed through the gallery. Christine and Janelle's gazes crossed briefly. The jury wrote more quickly. Not Kody himself? Not Robin? No. Now Canfair Holdings made the payments directly. And how much did you get paid? Mindy breathed deeply. $80,000 a year. Gasps echoed through the room. Christine had once been informed that there wasn't enough money to fund Isabel's surgery. Janelle had been informed that the family could not afford to construct on Coyote Pass. But here was evidence that a nanny was receiving more than some corporate managers. All out of the secret, LLC. Kody growled in his chair. Robin wiped her eyes with a tissue, her sniffles sounding thinly through the otherwise quiet courtroom. But Mindy wasn't done. Sharama leaned in, her voice low but authoritative. Miss Jessup, during the time you worked for the Brown family, did you ever catch discussions between Kody and Robin regarding the plaintiffs, Christine and Janelle? Yes, said Mindy, constantly. Can you give me an example? Mindy's fingers cinched tighter on the witness stand's rails. That autumn, of Faye Christine called to say, she needed Kody to come for Isabel's surgery. He was stomping in the living room, furious. He said, "She is not the head of this family. I am. She doesn't get to tell me what to do," Robin said to him. "She is manipulating you. She is using Isabel's pain to guilt you. If you give in, they'll all think they can call you out." The courtroom stilled. Christine gazed ahead, trying not to cry. A juror put her hand over her mouth. The gallery buzzed until the judge asked for order. And what did Kody do after that conversation? Sharama inquired. He turned off his phone and didn't answer Christine's calls for the remainder of the day. Robin cried harder now, but this time there was no sympathetic glance. The jury's gaze remained on Mindy, on Christine, on Janelle. And did you ever hear them discuss Janelle? Yes, Mindy replied. Kody would say she was too independent. He said she was being like the CFO of the family. Robin would say to him that independence was not safe, that perhaps he needed to cut back on the budget so she'd need to ask him for money. She phrased it like she was concerned for Janelle. But it was obvious. She was proposing means of keeping control. Kody slammed his pen down, his lawyer putting a hand on his arm to calm him. But the damage was done. Mindy wasn't bitter. She wasn't emotional. She wasn't exaggerating. She was calm, steady, factual, and devastating. Silas Croft rose for cross-examination, trying to discredit her. Miss Jessup, you're close with Christine, aren't you? You've spent time with her in Utah. Yes, she's my aunt too. So you're biased? You came here to help her, didn't you? I came here to tell the truth, Mindy replied. You stole $80,000 a year from Kody and Robin. But now you expect this jury to believe you were opposed to them all along. Mindy didn't blink. I stayed because I loved the kids, because they needed stability. But taking a paycheck doesn't mean I have to keep a secret forever, Croft sneered. So you say you overheard private conversations. Conversations years past, and you remember them verbatim? You don't forget a father referring to his daughter's surgery as manipulation, Mindy stated firmly. You don't forget Robin telling him to let Christine feel the consequences. Moments like those stick with you. The jury believed her. You could tell by looking at their faces. Croft's jabs only made her stronger. As she left the stand, Christine and Janelle offered her a small nod of thanks. Not dramatic, not loud, but strong, Robin cried openly. Tissues accumulating in front of her, but this time, tears did not influence anyone. And the jury knew it. By the time court reconvened following a brief recess, the room was charged. Mindy Jessup's testimony had been explosive, revealing the financial deception and emotional heartlessness behind Kody and Robin's beautifully manicured facade. But the plaintiff's attorneys weren't yet done. They were about to address the topic that had shattered the family on TV, Kody's notorious COVID Faye regulations. Christine and Janelle's lawyer, Anna Sharma, stood again. She was sharper in tone now, her game plan evident. She was no longer just establishing financial fraud. She was establishing intent, establishing malice, demonstrating to the jury that Kody and Robin's decisions weren't errors. They were on-purpose actions that destroyed their family. She requested Mindy to return to the witness stand. Miss Jessup, from March Faye until the end of Faye, were you still working for the Browns? Yes, Mindy answered. I was in the house nearly every day. Were you aware of the COVID Faye regulations Kody Brown imposed upon the family? Mindy nodded. Very familiar. They were on the fridge, laminated. No guests, no shopping, except if absolutely necessary. Wipe down each grocery, change clothes at the door, and if someone didn't comply exactly, Kody wouldn't visit with them. They weren't welcome at the house. The jury's eyes were sharp. Everyone recalled those scenes. Christine weeping over Isabel's surgery. Janelle's boys feeling left behind. Kody scolding the family over safety. Shararma went on. And were those rules applied consistently throughout the family? Mindy paused for an instant. Then she answered, "No, they weren't." The courtroom was silent. "Tell me what you mean, Miss Jessup." Mindy's tone remained firm. Christine and Janelle's children weren't invited over. Garrison and Gabriel were told they were too high risk. Janelle herself was instructed to quarantine after she went to the pharmacy. Christine pleaded with Kody to come visit Isabel prior to her surgery, and he wouldn't do it. He said there was too much risk yet. Simultaneously, Robin's parents visited her regularly. Her sister came by with her children. Friends of the family who are from Utah visited. I witnessed them embracing, sharing meals, piling around the fire pit. No masks, no social distancing. Gasps coursed through the gallery. Even the court reporter looked up from her machine briefly. "And did Kody join in on those visits?" Shararma asked. "Yes," said Mindy assertively. "He laughed with them, hugged them, played with the children, sat at the same table and ate. It was like COVID didn't exist behind those walls." Robin sobbed louder, her shoulders quivering. But this time, nobody reached out to comfort her. And did Kody ever accept that his treatment of Christine and Janelle's children was different from his treatment of Robin's family? "Yes," Mindy said. "I overheard him speaking to Robin one time. He was afraid that someone would find out," she said to him. "It is different. My family is cautious. They're safe. Janelle's boys are out working and dating. We can't trust them, but we can trust my family." The jury appeared, shocked, no longer mere hypocrisy. Now it was favoritism embedded in the very regulations that had dissolved the family. Christine remained immobile, her expression serene, but her eyes sparkling. Janelle clenched her hands tightly in her lap, her eyes fixed on the jury with silent intensity. Shararma's voice lifted. "So let me get this straight. While Christine's daughter was suffering and waiting for spinal surgery, while Janelle's boys were separated from their dad, Kody was enjoying his nights laughing with Robin's family under the same roof." "Yes," Mindy replied. "That is exactly what occurred." The faces of the jurors grew stern. One man shook his head in incredulity. A woman in the back row appeared to be seething. Kody hunched over his attorney, whispering curtly, his face flushing. Robin brushed her eyes, mascara smudging, but nothing could remove what had just been uttered. Silas Croft attempted once more on cross-examination, but it was futile. "Miss Jessup, you simply cannot be certain that those visitors quarantined before visiting you. You have no idea what their medical status is. Can't they have taken precautions?" Mindy didn't bat an eye. "I know Robin's sister had a public-facing job at the time. I know her parents moved around in their RV. They weren't isolating. Everyone in the house knew that. And yet you still work there?" Croft asked, trying to push. "Yes, because I loved the kids. But just because I remained doesn't mean that I must lie about what I saw." Her response hung there. Finally, Croft sat down, defeated. The harm was permanent. Kody and Robin's COVID regulations were exposed for the hypocrisy they were. It had nothing to do with safety, nothing to do with health. It was all about control, about leveraging a worldwide pandemic as a tool to keep Christine and Janelle isolated, while raising Robin's family as safe and trusted. And the jury got it. They weren't being told about fraud anymore. They were witnessing a pattern, a strategy, a calculated scheme to freeze Christine and Janelle out of the family, financially and emotionally, until there were only Kody and Robin left. Robin sobbed all the harder now, tissues stacked before her. But her tears weren't as heavy as they used to be, not when evidence and testimony painted a picture that the jury couldn't help but see. Christine and Janelle sat steadily, not smirking, not sneering, just unshakable. They lived the pain. They didn't have to reenact it. By the time Mindy exited the stand for a second time, the verdict had been all but written on the jury members' foreheads. Kody and Robin's defense was disintegrating, and everyone present was aware of it. And yet, the worst blow hadn't even been delivered. Because after that, the plaintiffs would produce their expert in finance, the man who would map every dollar, every transfer, every drained fund. And when the jury beheld those figures, Robin's tears wouldn't matter at all. While Mindy Jessup's evidence breached the bulwarks of Kody and Robin's defense, the following witness leveled the foundation. Anna Sharma addressed the jury with confidence and presented the man who would take the emotion out of the case and fill it with cold, indisputable figures. A forensic accountant, Dr. Marcus Ellery, with close to 3 decades of experience following money trails around cases of fraud, he was someone to be noticed. He wasn't present for theatrics. He was present for facts. Following the oath, Dr. Ellery put on his glasses, flipped open a thick binder, and started. Over the past 6 months, my office and I performed a thorough audit of Family Traditions, LLC KN Fair Holdings, LLC, and ancillary accounts related to Kody and Robin Brown. We analyzed bank statements, wire transfers, contracts, and tax returns. What we found is in line with a deliberate pattern of financial diversion, funds transferred from the family's joint account into an account solely in control of the defendants. The jury leaned forward. This wasn't an angry ex-wife talking. This was an expert with records. Sharma queried, "Doctor, can you define financial redirection?" Ellery nodded. Indeed, between 2019 and 2022, more than $300,000 was transferred from Family Traditions LLC into KN Fair Holdings. None of these transfers were reported to the other members of the LLC, Christine and Janelle Brown. Second, the money was not being used for joint family expenses. The money was being used to pay expenses strictly associated with Robin's household. What sort of expenses? Ellery turned a page. Home security improvements worth $30,000, jewelry buys of more than $15,000, transfers to an Amazon account that corresponded to Robin Brown's own login, credit card statements in Robin's name, and naturally, payroll payments to a nanny, Miss Jessup, of about $80,000 each year. Gasps came once more. Christine sat still, her hands together. Janelle's lips hardened into a line, her gaze fixed on Kody. And were these expenses approved by the other members of the LLC? No, answered Ellery bluntly. There is no evidence of signed approvals from Christine or Janelle Brown on any of these transactions. The courtroom buzzed. This wasn't merely unfair, it was against the law. Ellery went on, also TLC payments. The week-to-week payments to the family for appearing on the show were wired into Family Traditions LLC. But starting in 2019, 87% of those payments were wired out to KN Fair Holdings within days of receipt. Substantially less than 10% went toward general family expenses. The plaintiffs did not receive their proportional share. The jury wrote furiously. Lawyer Croft, representing Kody, objected, saying the transfers were normal estate planning. The judge rejected him. Ellery continued. One transfer in April 2020 was stamped estate planning retainer, $25,000. But our investigation verified it was spent to obtain a trust deed amendment for a property which stood solely in Robin Brown's name. In plain terms, family funds were spent to enhance Robin's sole proprietorship of property. That sentence came down like a sledgehammer. Christine shut her eyes for an instant. Janelle shook her head. And Dr. Sharma inquired, "From your examination, what would the financial standing of the family have been if these transfers had not happened?" Ellery leaned forward. By the end of 2021, there would have been sufficient capital in Family Traditions LLC to build 2 other houses on the Coyote Pass property, one for Christine, one for Janelle. Silence, the dream that the women had been sold on, the dream of houses for each wife, of equality, of prosperity shared, had been taken from them penny by penny. Robin was crying again, tissues rumpled in her fists. Kody glared daggers at Ellery, his jaw working frantically, but he did not speak. Sharma projected slides before the jury, a pie chart indicating 87% of TLC funds channeled to KN Fair Holdings, and a ledger of the biggest transactions. It was horribly evident. This, Sharma indicated the chart, is not plural marriage. This is betrayal of finance. When it was time for cross-examination, Croft attempted to shoot down. Dr. Ellery, isn't it true that big families tend to pool money and redistribute it as needed? Yes, Ellery replied coolly. But transparency is needed for redistribution. Here, money was redirected systematically with no disclosure. That is not redistribution, That is concealment. Croft's face grew taut. He pushed again. And you can't establish intent, can you? Ellery didn't flinch. The regularity of the transfers, the timing, and the personal expenditures pointedly indicate intent. In my expert opinion, this was not a coincidence. The jury nodded. Croft sat down, beaten once more. By the time Ellery left the stand, the case had all but been decided. The jury had glimpsed the paper trail. They had heard the witness testimony. Robin's tears streamed freely, but the numbers didn't mind. The numbers spoke. Christine and Janelle sat serene for the first time in weeks. Not triumphant. Not smug. Just vindicated. Kody and Robin, however, seemed cornered their go-to defense tactic, appealing to sympathy, turning the situation into a family dispute, was disintegrating with the help of solid facts. And the kicker? The trial wasn't yet finished. For Anna Sharma had held back her best ammunition for now. Her closing statement, a rebuttal that would slice through the deception, the tears, and the alibis, leaving the jurors with one option and crew. When you listen to what she had to say, you'll see why the jury only took less than an hour to render the verdict that broke Kody's world. The courtroom air was charged. Everyone knew the finish was imminent. Christine and Janelle had waited in the wings, and now their lawyer, Anna Sharma, was ready to deal the knockout punch. She didn't pace back and forth. She didn't shout. She stood at attention, her voice level, her language economical. For years, she started. My clients felt they were part of something greater than themselves. They made sacrifices. They brought children into the family. They contributed to the finances. They were told they were equals in a plural family, but the facts tell a different tale. A tale of deceit, a tale of manipulation, a tale where their sacrifices were spent enabling a clandestine lifestyle. She pointed towards the charts still up on the projector. You saw the money, $300,000 funneled from a communal account into a personal one. You saw the nanny's pay, $80,000 a year while Janelle slept in an RV and Christine pinched to relocate her family to Utah. You heard the evidence, Isabel's spinal operation written off as manipulation. Christine's calls disregarded, Janelle's autonomy defined as menace. And you witnessed the hypocrisy of COVID regulations being employed as a tool to split this family. Ladies and gentlemen, this wasn't a misinterpretation. This wasn't a mishandling. This was betrayal. A betrayal of trust. A betrayal of duty. A betrayal of family. The room was quiet. Even the judge leaned forward, his face stern. Sharma's voice was raised, but barely so. Christine and Janelle are not standing before us today requesting sympathy. They are standing before us today requesting justice. And justice requires accountability. Not out of bitterness, not out of revenge, but because what they had taken from them was worth more than cash. It was dignity. It was truth. And today you have the ability to restore it. Then she uttered the line that each reporter present would quote later. Tears can't wash away fraud, and sympathy cannot excuse betrayal. She turned directly at Robin. The weeping woman lost her tissue, her body trembling. Sharma addressed the jury a final time. Hold them accountable. Give these women back their voices. Show them that truth matters. Thank you. And with that, she sat down. The courtroom hummed. Kody's attorney worked his hardest with closing statements, turning Christine and Janelle into scorned wives and maintaining the transfers were for the good of the family, but it did not ring true. Following weeks of testimony and evidence, it felt like emptiness. Then came the hour. The judge sent the case to the jury deliberation. Everybody had waited hours, perhaps days, but 48 minutes passed before the bailiff brought in the word. The jury had made a decision. The courtroom was full once more. Each chair filled, reporters bent forward, pencils poised. Christine and Janelle sat in tandem, serene but unflinching. Kody tapped his leg beneath the table, counting out loud under his breath. Robin held her rosary so hard her knuckles whitened. The foreperson rose. The judge spoke aloud. On the count of breach of fiduciary duty for the plaintiffs. Christine breathed softly. On the count of unjust enrichment for the plaintiffs. Janelle clutched her lawyer's hand. On the count of intentional infliction of emotional distress for the plaintiffs. Robin's weeping filled the air. Kody shook his head in shock, whispering, Number, this isn't real. The judge wasn't done yet. He read the damages. Payment of Coyote Pass investments back, $782,000. Redistribution of revenues from TLC $1.26 million. Damages for emotional harm $500,000 to Christine and Janelle Brown. Dissolution and winding up of Karen Fair Holdings LLC, with assets to be distributed as per order of the court. It was over. Christine closed her eyes, silent tears streaming down her cheeks. Janelle smiled weakly, her fortitude revealed even in the gentlest of movements. Kody slumped in his chair. Robin clung to him, sobbing against his shoulder. But he pushed her away, his face contorted with anger. The jury seemed pleased. The spectators in the courtroom murmured angrily, and already the headlines were being penned. Jury brings Brown family legend to an end in 48 minutes. But as the gavel came down and the case was brought to a close, something strange occurred. A journalist sprinted from the viewing area, talking urgently to a colleague. A crumpled piece of paper came to light, a leak. Rumors spread rapidly, murmurs growing louder and louder, until even the judge looked around, bewildered. The rumors whispered something more sinister: sealed evidence, concealed names. A link between K and Fair Holdings and payments from beyond the family. Funds that didn't originate solely with TLC. The jury never heard it. The judge never ruled on it. But the document was authentic, and it was out in the hands of the press. Now Christine and Janelle left that courtroom free, vindicated, and triumphant. But Kody and Robin, their horror show wasn't done. Because if what is contained in that sealed testimony becomes known, this won't be a civil case anymore. It could be federal. And crew, if that happens, this story won't end in divorce court, it'll end in handcuffs.